In this episode of r/Entitled Parents, I've got an unbelievable update for you from yesterday's video. Now, if you haven't yet seen that one, please do go and watch that first. It's first link in the description, pinned comment, behind the I button right now as well, but I will quickly summarize what happened. Pretty much, OP's mum is one of the worst Karens I've ever come across, and she's been constantly trying to get rid of OP's husband for years. Now, if you've seen yesterday's episode already, you'll know that is literally touching the surface. But in this one, we have that update I promised if you got to 1,000 likes in 24 hours. And as you can see on screen, you absolutely smashed it. I backed you all the way. So without further ado, here we go. My mother graffitied my father's grave to get my attention. I'm freaking disgusted. After all the things my mum has done, this is the one that hurts the most. My parents were 15 when they had me. They got married and they lasted for 5 years because my father cheated. My mum tried everything in her power to get me to hate my dad. She told me that my daddy was a gangbanger. He sold drugs, dope, helped his uncle run his brothel sometimes, and was constantly in shootouts. Now, this was all true, as my dad was more unfortunate than my mum's side of the family, so the streets were his life. Even though he was like that, I never stopped loving my dad. How can you love your father when he cheated on me and ruined our family? Was something I constantly heard in my childhood. I know cheating is wrong, but I honestly feel like my dad used cheating as an out to get away from my mum. I always loved my dad, and even though he never paid child support and was a gangbanger, he was my favorite parent, because from an early age, I knew my mum was freaking bat crazy. She was a spoiled brat then, and she's a spoiled brat now. My husband said my mum has a personality of someone who would falsely accuse someone of R when she can't get her way. And he's right. I hate my mother. She ruined my childhood. She ruined my wedding, but she never ruined the relationship I had with my dad. I remember the time I was 6 years old. My dad went to prison for the first time, and my mum threw a freaking celebration. Then she threw a funeral when he got out when I was 11. It repeats. He went to jail when I was 13. My mum threw a party, and then again another funeral when he got out when I was 15. He went to jail when I was 17 and got out some months later, and yet again my mum threw a party and then a funeral. I had my wedding when I was 18 and I invited my dad. I wanted him to walk me down the aisle, and my mum lost her head. That's a long story for another time. And that's when I told my dad to quit that life. I was pregnant, he was going to be a granddad, and I needed him. He promised me he would quit, and he kept that promise. My dad was my everything. He was my daughter's best friend, and he had a beer with my husband every Monday. 7 months ago, when I found out I was pregnant again, someone broke into my dad's house and killed him in his sleep. He was shot point blank in his face with no remorse. I was the one who found him. He missed the date he had planned with my daughter, and he wasn't answering his phone, so I went to go check on him. I will never forget the image of my father lying in his bed, his brain and blood spattered on the wall. At his actual funeral this time, my mother was in the back in all black, crying like she gave a dang. And when we were alone, she looked me dead in the eye and told me that she's happy that racist slur for black people, racist slur for Mexican people, he was half black and half Mexican, was finally in hell. Let's just say I didn't leave that church without some of her hair in my hand. And after all of that, after all of frickin' that, my stupid ass let my psychopathic ass frickin' idiot of a butt mother back in my life. Because my stupid frickin' hormonal ass wanted a frickin' parent. I wish I could go back in time and kick my stupid butt in the chest. And for those people who didn't read my post or watch the video I uploaded yesterday, again, you need to go back and listen to that before you watch this one, or at least do it right now. Once again, it's behind the I button, linked first in the description. It is incredible. OP continues. You read that? You read how much of a freaking mistake that was? Yeah, I know. And I don't know how to freaking explain why I let her back in when I have my freaking in-laws. Now, my mum didn't show up yesterday. I was surprised she didn't, but I should have known she was up to something. Every Saturday, we visit my dad's grave just to talk. We bring him flowers, and as I know my dad burnt a lot of bridges, I'm one of the few family members who will still do that for him. I missed a few weeks due to what happened in my latest post, so I was ready to explode at how his freaking ex is a lunatic. My daughter was so excited just to talk to Grandpa, because she hadn't talked to him in a few weeks. I was in my wheelchair being pushed by my husband while my daughter was on my lap. We were excited. But my mum couldn't handle the fact that I was ignoring her on purpose, so she freaking wrote, "I'm sorry, Addison," on his freaking tombstone. She also smashed his pictures and things that I left out for him, like candles and some of his cars from his collection. How do I know that my mum did it? Because I took a picture of it and I asked why she did this, and her freaking reply was, "That was the only way I know how to get you to respond to me. By disrespecting my dad's grave." I've stopped crying. Now the tears are gone. Now I'm so ready to curb stomp her. It feels like I found my dad's body all over again. So we're waiting for the cops because apparently, according to Google, that's illegal. I'll update afterwards. And here's the update immediately. My mum has been arrested. According to my stepdad, yes, she is married. She's on her third marriage, and that stupid idiot thinks she has the right to tell me how to live mine. She punched a cop and clawed another in the face. I'll update you all tomorrow. I'm about to go take a nap. I swear to God, if I wasn't pregnant right now, I would be so drunk. And there we go. Honestly, I didn't think that this update post could be worse than what I read yesterday, but graffitiing a dead man's grave. Are you serious? That is next level. At this point, OP, you have to cut ties. That she's been arrested now, finally. You don't want this woman in your life anymore. That's clear to see. Like, what is wrong with her? Some of the stuff she did in yesterday's video was bad. This is just ridiculous. Parents made every single birthday about my sister for the last 8 years. I recently saw a similar story read online and realized I just had to tell my own. This will be my one and only Reddit post, and I'm posting it because I thought telling it would help me feel a little better. I've been to some counseling and talking about this in particular really helped. So I thought, why not just tell it online too? So I am. I am 18 this year and fairly recently on my own from my parents. I have a sister about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy and nearly didn't make it to term. I don't know many of the details of how rough my mother's second pregnancy were since I was never told much, but I do know that it was so hard on her body that my mother could no longer have kids after my sister was born. She was in and out of the hospital repeatedly that year. My mother almost didn't survive the birth either. It made her and my father latch onto my little sister because potentially she could have never been born. Now ever since then, I felt like I was just the other kid in the house, except for when they needed me as a free babysitter. The level of favoritism my parents showed long term has me believing they were genuinely sick in the head for not noticing exactly what it was doing to me. And now it's rebounding on them, which I'll explain here. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents wanted me to let my sister blow out my candles because she was 2 years old, and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I didn't want to do it, but my parents forced me into it. They relit the candles for me to do it again after her, but the moment felt completely ruined. The same thing happened the next year and the year after that, and so on and so forth. They just kept forcing it until it became the norm. My sister had to have presents on my birthdays as well. I never got any on hers either, and when I asked why, they just told me that I'm a boy, and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I know I was a kid, but did they really think that was a smart thing to say? Not really. And my parents would always choose a place my sister would like to be at more than me on my own birthday. Eventually, it became more like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year and I got none. Beyond this, my parents made their entire lives revolve around my sister. If there's something I wanted to do, my sister had to want to do it too. Otherwise, it was vetoed, unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't seem to bother me there, unless my sister wanted to come running in to annoy me. Hence why I put a lock on the door. My parents wanted me to remove it, but I freaked out because I was an angry teenager who was tired of being intruded on at any given time. My sister came running in more than once when I had no clothes on, and my parents were upset at me for being naked in my own room. When I pointed out just how ludicrous that was, they withdrew their objection and just let me keep the lock. My sister developed quite the princess complex because of how she was being spoiled on a daily basis, and she was very demanding, so I stayed away from her as much as I feasibly could. Whatever excuse I could use to not have to deal with her, even if I had to make stuff up just to have time to myself. My parents hired a teen girl babysitter and I got more personal time. And then the babysitter quit because my sister wouldn't listen to her and my parents tried to keep from paying by saying she was doing a bad job. The girl got some other people involved and my parents finally paid her what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit on the regular, and this one stayed, but my parents still made it clear that I was to be watching my sister any day I had free, which I went out of my way to make busy at my part-time job if I could. My sister treated me as her personal butler and ordered me around. She even had a stupid nickname for me she wouldn't stop using. Just hearing that nickname makes my blood boil, and if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she'd cry and call our parents, and then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her. We had many massive arguments because of this, and after I refused to yield anymore, my relationship with my parents devolved into barely any words spoken between us for some time. And yet, during my high school graduation, they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they weren't wrong, but the reason they were thinking of was not the one that actually happened. I worked hard just biding my time for when I'd be free. But my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born, but afterwards it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B and C average, and after my graduation, my parents just took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. On my 18th birthday in July though, things really boiled to the surface. Even though it was my 18th, it didn't feel like it was about me at all. I hoped to God that we were going to my favourite restaurant for once. But no, they had the party at the local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese, which is the only place like it nearby to us, so it was the de facto celebratory destination whenever anything big was achieved, including my high school graduation. I did say it was a place my sister would enjoy more than me. I was surrounded by kids half my age having parties, and I was so bored with nothing to do but eat mediocre pizza and play claw machines and dated arcade games for tickets to cheaply made prizes that brought me no joy. Then when it was time for cake, my parents came out with one that was pink with white flowers on it. Sure, it had my name on, but it was very obviously not a boy's cake, and there were only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and set it right in front of my sister to blow out. That is when it finally happened. I just had this mental moment of all this pent-up hate mentally flashing before me, and then I just started ugly crying. Me, an 18-year-old boy, crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so shocked that time seemed to just freeze. I got up and all of the stuff I'd been holding in for the past 8 years just spilled out like word vomit. The entire family got to be witness to this event, and when it was finally over, I just walked outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives trailed out after me to say they were sorry and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents kept it covered until it was served. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all sat back and watched as my life was taken over by Little Miss Sunshine for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or celebrations of my own. They were all about her. And then, on the biggest birthday of my life, they all expected me to just smile and nod like always while they handed my sister a cake that was entirely meant for her when it wasn't even her birthday. Some of them started giving me apologies, but they made the excuse that all this time they just thought I was okay with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never okay with it, and my parents forced it on me every year till I just pretended to accept it. I spread my arms out and said to look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday? No one even tried to stick up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them long ago after they tried to voice their opinions over my sister getting to blow out my candles. There are 365 days in a year, and was it so bad to want one that was about me and not her? Instead, I'm treated like the greedy entitled brat for wanting my own birthday. Then I just went back to ugly crying. My father came outside by that point to yell at me for making such a huge scene, because my mother was crying too. My sister was upset because I ruined her moment, and now everybody in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I ended up yelling at him that they are bad parents and he should know exactly why. Well, after I said that, the rest of the family descended on him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I suppose, but I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was practically backed right up to the restaurant front door, and then most of the crowd flooded back inside with him to have it out with my mother too. My grandparents stayed with me and apologized for having their eyes shut so tight for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but it was roughly a half hour before they came back out. And when they did, they looked incredibly defeated. My mother was still sniffing after crying so hard, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both awkwardly apologized for what they did and then offered to redo the party elsewhere. But that wasn't really enough for the crowd. One of my uncles ahemed rather loudly, and my parents said they'd never make me let my sister blow up my candles again, or give her presents on my birthday, or make any part of it about her. There was another ahem, and my parents also apologized for getting a cake that was obviously not even meant for me, and that they just felt like I wasn't worried about cake anymore at my age. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I became furious all over again and yelled at them that my age was irrelevant. They'd literally given my birthday to my sister and had no good reason as to why, and they knew it. Then I said there was no point in redoing the party because it's too dang late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life till I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get angry at me for saying that, but when the entire family yelled at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm exactly right, and there is no possible way they can undo the damage done now. He said my parents were awful people, played favourites, and treated me like a black sheep ever since my sister was born. And what's more, they were all awful themselves because they just let it happen too. And I'm owed far more than an apology. I was owed my life back. And there we go. Another incredible story. I mean, I don't know what it is today in the last couple of episodes with these stories just being so deep and lasting so long. I thought the previous one was bad. I mean, that lasted a long time. But this one, 8 years of just pure negligence and not even feeling like your own parents even know you exist. I don't know what mental effect that would have on someone, but fair play OP for keeping on because that is ridiculous. Again. Now, similar to yesterday, OP has posted an update to this story. Once again, if you want to hear it in tomorrow's episode, we can go back to back Entitled Parents if you guys want. If you want to see it in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to up the ante. 1,500 likes in 24 hours, or I'll do another subreddit. Again, up to you lot. If you want triple back-to-back Entitled Parents and the continuation of this story, let me know by liking the episode.